Yes. Hello. I am Terry Wisdom with Harlem Network News, and I have been co-hosting a series on gun violence with WBAI. What's going on, Isaac Ferguson. And today we have the honor to have with us our Brooklyn District Attorney, Eric Gonzalez. Very critical, and this is our eighth series in gun violence. So thank you very much. DA Eric Gonzalez, please introduce yourself and just tell us who you are, whose you are, and briefly what this journey to the Brooklyn District Attorney has been for you. Thank you.
Well, Terry, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you as we talk about this important issue of public safety and gun violence. You know, my journey is a very unique journey to being the district attorney of Brooklyn. I started my career, over 25 years ago, and the reality of it is, I grew up primarily in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and East New York. And when I lived in East New York, I lived there during the throes of the crack cocaine epidemic. I witnessed firsthand, the violence that that drug caused in my community of East New York. A lot of great, hardworking families, but crack cocaine really caused a lot of damage in our community. And as a young person growing up there, I saw a lot of people that I knew either go to jail or lose their life over guns and gang violence. The year that I was graduating from law school, and it really motivated me to become a prosecutor, I applied to the Brooklyn DA's office, and I said 128 people were murdered in my precinct. That was just in one precinct of Brooklyn, the 75 precinct. That was called the homicide capital of New York City. I lived I lived there during the most difficult years in Brooklyn's history, when we had over 800 homicides a year in the county. We're so far away from that today in terms of public safety, and I'm going to talk about that hopefully later on. But that motivated me to do that. But at the same time, and this is critically important, I also, while I understood the devastating impact of violence, I really did see what I thought was over incarceration in Brooklyn and in East New York. And a lot of my friends growing up went to jail or prison. And I thought there had to be a better way of doing this work. And, who made decisions that impacted communities in our criminal legal system. And so I decided to take this journey to the DA's office to see it for myself. I was very fortunate. I had some good mentors who allowed me to grow as an attorney, who allowed me to exercise judgment and discretion around alternatives to incarceration and second chances. And in 2013, something remarkable happened because Ken Thompson, our first Black district attorney in Kings County, won an upset election, took over the realms of the Brooklyn DA's office, and he asked me to come and serve with him as chief prosecutor in the office. So I was the chief assistant DA under Ken Thompson. Many of you may remember that Ken really is quite well known around this issue of post-justice conviction. He started a conviction review unit, and he did some work around the prosecution of marijuana and other great things. Unfortunately, he passed away in basically his third year in office, and I decided to run to continue that legacy. I was elected in 2017. Ken was the first Black man to ever hold this position, and I became the first Hispanic person to ever hold the title of district attorney in the history of New York State. I'm the first Latino district attorney, not just in Brooklyn, but in the entire state. And it's a journey that's very unique because I served as a young prosecutor, worked in the office, but then was given that mentorship from Ken to lead. And I've chosen to take on that mantle and continue to fight the good fight of keeping communities safe, but doing it in fundamentally fair ways in ways that the community feels that their voice matters and that they'll be treated fairly in our justice system.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And what a journey. And congratulations on just staying on the path, staying connected to the community. And obviously, you know the community. So
And
that's
I still live in East New York.
okay.
And I think that's important because, I can still unfortunately, um, hear and see some of the challenges that we face in our communities around public safety and around justice issues. And so I stay connected. And I think that gives me a lot of insight into what we need to do to move in the right direction.
Okay, well, thank you for that. The other question that we had, we're hearing from Mayor Adams and, your other DA counterparts. We were with DA Alvin Bragg, that crime and gun violence are down. And because people are hearing things on the news, there's a shooting, this is happening, that's happening, they kind of don't necessarily believe gun violence is down. And, the question is like, is it down overall in the city? Is that the way they're knowing it's down? Like, is it down in Brooklyn? What is the situation in terms of gun violence being down in your borough?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we're all, while we're one big unified city, we are a city of boroughs. New York City on whole, you'll hear the mayor, the police commissioner talk about gun violence is down by over 20% in the city, but that may not speak to where you live. Where you live could be an area where they've seen an increase in gun violence. We're very fortunate in Brooklyn. Not only is gun violence down this year, gun shooting incidents are down by over 15% currently. Our homicide rate is down nearly 25%. It's over 20% currently. That's remarkable. It's remarkable that you can reduce homicides by a quarter in a year. We are down significantly. Last year, I was able to tell the people of Brooklyn that we had the safest year in terms of gun violence. And it was the safest year, not just the safest year in the last 2 years or 3 years or 5 years in the history. And this year, Terry, something remarkable is happening in the county. We have had the fewest number of homicides and shooting incidents that we've ever had. This year will be the safest year in Brooklyn's history, probably by a very large margin. And that does not happen simply because of prosecution and police enforcement. It was a real commitment made by myself and many people in Brooklyn to invest in gun prevention, violence, gang prevention, violence, to try to do the prevention side of the work. Every DA in the city prosecutes cases and does that well. What we did in Brooklyn is several years ago, we really leaned in to work with our clergy, to work with violence interrupters, to work with community-based organizations, with our schools to do prevention. And we're seeing the fruits of that today with the lowest gun violence rate ever. And here's the thing that is remarkable and what I've learned as district attorney. Every time we stop one of these shootings, especially when they're gang related, we're stopping 2 or 3 retaliatory shootings. I'm calling it, a gun, reduction, but it's really a peace dividend, right? Like we're being paid back in peace. It's a peace dividend. You stop one shooting, you're really stopping 2 or 3 shootings from happening. And the people of Brooklyn are fortunate for that. But we do this as community. There's not one part of the system that deserves credit over this over other parts. Every part plays its role, and prevention is a key piece.
Okay, thank you for that, because that's one of the things we've had doctors on, the president of Howard University Hospital, and that came up even after people are shot, that they're doing some great work because they know there's retaliation and revenge. So in the hospital, they're like counseling and working on that, and set up some medical programs for people to become doctors. So what specific?
We have that in Brooklyn at Brookdale Hospital and other places, but cure violence model, but working with our violence interrupters and figuring out ways to de-escalate community problems and beefs before they become shootings.
Okay, okay, because another part of what we wanted to discuss, well, I'm gonna jump to this one. How, in terms of the gun violence, is most of the gun violence like handguns, or is it automatic weapons, ghost guns? I know we heard a few weeks ago, a month ago, about mass shooting at a club in Brooklyn. So where and how is this happening? And how does it fit into the nationwide situation? Because people are very concerned. A lot of people want some new legislation in terms of the handguns, the ghost guns, but certainly a lot of people just want a shutdown on these automatic weapons.
Yeah, so the responsible answer is better gun control and better gun policy emanating from Washington, D.C. Every state is allowed to regulate how they allow citizens of their communities to possess, buy, and sell guns. There are obviously federal standards. But what we see is places like New York City, where we have fairly strict gun protocols, and you have to have a license and you have to get a clearance. It's very rigid and stringent who's allowed to carry a concealed firearm in our city. In other parts of the country, in particular down south, where a lot of these guns come from, the laws are very loose. There's no limits to how many guns you can buy. They're not keeping careful records. Some of the background checks are not being done. There are loopholes. Like, you can buy, if you go to a gun store, you have to have a background check. But if you go to a gun show or third-party sale, there's no background checks. These are crazy loopholes that allow guns to be purchased and then resold at a premium in New York City. We do a number of gun trafficking cases, and that's been called the Iron Pipeline. I think many of your viewers, understand that there's a problem that these guns are being purchased and then brought up from down south, Virginia, Atlanta, and a number of those states, the Carolinas, and just being brought here. And when we see those guns, 90% of those guns that are used in crimes are guns that are come from these states, right? So there's a real direct pipeline between the time that gun is taken from down south, comes here, and is used in the crime. And we have to have better gun control and regulations in that. Now, I have my responsibilities. We do gun trafficking cases, and we capture people, not only who are selling the guns illegally here, but those who are traveling from down south and bringing them here. So we're doing those trafficking cases, holding them accountable. We also do voluntary gun buybacks and other programs to reduce the flow of guns on our streets. The first part of your question was, what am I more concerned about? Am I concerned about these assault weapons, or am I concerned about ghost guns or handguns? The answer is unequivocally, I'm concerned about handguns. Almost all of the crimes in Brooklyn are committed by handguns. Ghost guns pose their own challenges, but at the end of the day, ghost guns are handguns. They're small, they're easily concealed in someone's jacket or pants pocket, and when they shoot you, they cause tremendous damage to your person. So we have to get these guns off our streets, and we have to deal in particular with this gun violence, with people being afraid to live in their communities. Because I talk to a lot of young men who get arrested with guns, and I don't believe all of them want to shoot someone or rob anyone. I think most of them do not. But so many of these young men carry guns because they're afraid to live in their communities, and they don't think the police can keep them safe. We have to give them that basic reassurance that we're with them, that we're going to keep them safe in their communities, and that teaching them that carrying a gun is the worst thing they can do, because the stats are clear. You're going to either wind up in jail, for carrying a gun illegally, or you're going to be engaged in gun violence, either as a victim or perpetrator of that gun violence. And then, something, you're either going to lose your life or, go to jail. Guns are dangerous, and we should be teaching our young people that carrying these guns should be the equivalent of touching the third rail on the subway track. Don't do it. It's not keeping you safer. One last thought on this is there's really only a small number of people that are it seems like a lot, like you said, people hear about it on the news and
Right.
social
Yes.
media. But there's really only a small number of people who are engaged in gun violence. I estimate it to be about 1% of my population in the Brooklyn. It's something that we can tackle with appropriate enforcement and appropriate outreach. And by outreach, it's not just the enforcement. We work in Brooklyn very close with our community partners to identify young people that we believe are at risk of gun violence and engaging them in productive ways so that they can, make the decision that carrying a gun is not in their best interest. That has been part of the equation here in Brooklyn in reducing gun violence, is by getting out into the community and dealing with the people that we know, because our community members tell us these guys are carrying guns, and having them disarm themselves because they feel like there's something worthwhile in their life and they don't want to throw it away and go to jail.
Thank you really for sharing that, because it kind of covers, we're seeing a lot of boys, male, younger and younger, involved in this gun violence thing. And you kind of spoke about it in terms of the boy violence. And do you believe that those that are committing gun crimes or murders that are underage, should they be tried as adults?
Well, I think those kind of decisions have to be made, on a case by case specific decision. I do believe that kids should be treated like kids in our criminal legal system, that, we should view what a child does, understanding the capacity of where they're at in terms of their brain development, how mature, how immature they are. There's a lot of things that we need to consider. But when a young person takes a life, when they shoot and hurt somebody, there's certain harms and certain damage that that you have to be held accountable, and it's going to look different on things. But what is most troubling is that when young people who come into the system and they're 14 and 15 years old, we're not figuring out how to touch them and appropriately try to rehabilitate them. That's the goal of family court, is to get them back on the right path. And we have not done a good job at doing that. I encourage our elected officials, our governor and many others to really think about, putting way more resources, financial resources, judge resources, social work resources into our family courts so that they can have meaningful rehabilitative services there, and that they don't wind up on my plate as defendants later on, because so many of our young people, by the time they get to Supreme Court in the adult system, they have 4 or 5 significant arrests as juveniles, and seemingly there's been no attempt to really rehabilitate them. And that is the solution. Prevention is the key. There are going to be some people who choose a lifestyle of gang and violence, and we know how to deal with them. But for many of our young people, that first contact into the system is a really good chance to reach them, and then to bring in their guardian or parent, whoever they're dealing with, to get those people resources. My biggest concern is that there is no services for the families that are significantly designed to help family members deal with their sons who are engaging in this kind of misconduct.
Okay, I think that's amazing, because very important. The family members, the whole circle, the whole community. Recidivism. How? Because I guess you've addressed that.
Yeah,
In terms of once they're in, if you don't nip it right there, it can continue. And just become a circle and, lead to further gun violence.
Yeah,
So,
raising children is a hard task, and not everyone is equally ready and capable at the moment that they're, in parenthood. And we have to make sure that they have the resources and the ability to do this work together. It takes that community to do it. I have, I understand my job is to make sure people in Brooklyn and New York City on the whole are safe. But knowing that our young people can change their behavior, we don't want to give up on them too soon. And I think a lot of the answers don't rest in Supreme Court. They rest in these family courts that are designed to give rehabilitative services to young people to get them back on track. By the time they come up to Supreme Court, they're older, and they've kind of been living in that lifestyle for a long time. We got to get to them at 13, 14, and 15-year-old when they first start getting arrested. And theoretically, even sooner than that through the school system before they get arrested. But at the very least, at the time before they become recidivists, that first contact as a juvenile, we have to help them and help their families.
okay. Thank you for that. And is there like something that really stands out that your office is doing that you're proud of?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
share.
proud of a lot of things. I'm proud of the record crime reduction in the county. Crime is down across the board. Like I said, homicides are down over 20%. Shootings are down by over 15%. Real saving families, the trauma of gun violence. But I'm also very proud of this, and it's sort of an aside. We spend a considerable amount of time and resources hosting one of the largest conviction review units in the United States. I have 10 attorneys that look at claims of innocence, and they go back and they reinvestigate a lot of these cases where people have been sentenced to 30, 40, 50 years in jail. They've been in jail. And all these years while in prison, they've always claimed and held that they were innocent. We go back, we look at those cases. And in the last, decade, on 41 occasions, we've been able to identify cases where innocent people had been convicted, where the appellate courts did not provide any relief to them, left them in prison. And this district attorney's office, under my leadership and my former boss, Ken Thompson, has offered the ability to get their good names back, get them out of jail, and correct a miscarriage of justice. I am so proud of that work, because that's what justice is. Justice is never saying, well, you were convicted, I don't have to worry about it. It's an ongoing obligation to get it right. And when we get it right, we help, create trust in the office. And since the conviction review unit, not only have we vacated 41 wrongful convictions, we've also dealt with hundreds and hundreds of cases of police misconduct, which is also being charged by this unit. So we're really doing good work in the county. And I think we're one of the country leaders, not just the city leaders, but in the United States, leaders in doing this work carefully and responsibly. And I encourage anyone who's interested, we write a full report on all of these cases about how the system got it wrong. And they're out there on our website. Please look them up. Some of these cases are truly heartbreaking. People have lost decades of their life in prison for crimes they should have never been convicted of.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's been certainly a robust conversation. And this whole gun violence is near to my heart. My own son was shot and killed 4 years ago on the Shinnecock Reservation. Still a cold case. And that's coming up on November 5th. So I'm grateful to be able to do this work, help other people and families.
Well, I wish you peace, and the fight for justice for your son continues to find out who's responsible for taking his life. God bless his memory, and keep fighting to get the word out.
Ali Wisdom. So thank you so much. This has been great, and we will certainly have you back again, because we're having all eyes on the gun violence that is happening in so many of our communities. Even
I'm grateful. I'm grateful to you, Terry, for covering this, and there is good news in the County of Kings. We're really starting to handle gun violence in ways that will mean that less families will suffer what you went through.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. All right.
All right, have a great day.